Welcome back, Axis and Allies players. It's Wars of the World, the Spanish-American War, straight from the nest, and coming up after this, the Second Boer War.
Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest, and this is the intro for the Spanish-American War. Now, hold on, I misplaced my notes. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. The Spanish-American War, I'm terrible with dates, started in 1898, started in spring of 1898, went to about fall of 1898, at least America's involvement in it. And the beginning of the whole thing was Cuba was rebelling against Spain. And what got America's attention really was the work of journalists. That's also where you start hearing the phrase yellow journalism. Basically, journalists spinning a story a particular way to put forward a particular political agenda. And anybody that knows it has read anything about it, the stories that certain journalists were writing back to America painted a picture of this just horrible brutality and mass killings and pillaging, and while to an extent that certainly did happen, the Spanish occupation / rule, particularly during the rebellion, was not gentle by any means. But it's fair to say that journalists did inflate the treatment that the Spanish were giving the Cubans by a decent amount. So public interest in America over Cuba was more or less brought about by this journalism, and then the public resentment against Spain for the mistreatment steadily grew. What was enticing for the American government was actually Spain's holdings in the Pacific, because at this point in time America was the only quote-unquote major power that did not have any naval bases in the Pacific. And the reason why that's important is because ships at this point in time operated off of coal. So in order to get around, especially in the Pacific, the various navies of the nations needed coaling stations, so it meant they needed bases. So every quote-unquote major power or important power had these various naval bases in the Pacific. Russia had Port Arthur. Germany had a base around the Peking area on the map. England had Hong Kong, and then Sarawak, and the Dutch had the Dutch East Indies, and France even had bases. So everyone had these coaling stations in various islands, Pacific islands. Spain obviously having the Philippines and Guam. And so what that did is it seriously limited America's ability to operate a navy in the Pacific, because we didn't have any coaling stations. So it limited our range, and it limited our strategic options by quite a substantial amount. Whereas all the other European powers did not have that limitation. So America really wanted bases in the Pacific to get its own coaling stations. That way we wouldn't have to rely you know, on British or French or German stations and be at the mercy of their good graces. So, from the American government standpoint, intervening with the Cuban rebellion against Spain would give America the opportunity to get those coaling stations in the Pacific. By this point, the Spanish Empire has dwindled to almost nothing. By this point, 1898, the only colonies Spain have left is Cuba and the Philippines, and to a much lesser extent, Guam. It's lost all of its South American colonies. Mexico won its independence, a couple scenarios ago. So all Spain has left is Cuba and Philippines. It had Guam and other tiny islands, but in terms of an actual Spanish presence and population and infrastructure, is Cuba and the Philippines. That was it. So this is the last breath of the Spanish Empire. So, as I said, this is another short scenario, another short war. It only lasted a couple months, at least for America. The rebellion in Cuba had been going on for several years at this point. I've thought about including the Cuban rebels, but territory so tiny, it's going to be crowded enough when America gets there. I decided to leave out the Cuban rebels just because of space issues. No new technologies introduced other than the fact that America is operating metal ships now. So cruisers have been unlocked, so I guess that is a technology. Spain is still using the sail ships, and that's for gameplay purposes. I don't want people mistakenly think that Spain was still flying around wooden sail ship galleons. The reason why I have Spain still using the sail ship pieces is because Spain had fallen behind in naval technology. They weren't, they weren't Pirates of the Caribbean, wooden sail ships. They were, I guess, the Spanish Navy was kind of a mixture. It had metal ships, and it still had some wooden ships, but the important thing to remember is that Spain, at least navally, had fallen behind the other world powers pretty substantially in terms of naval technology. Their ships were old, outdated, and were no match for modern cruisers and battle cruisers that that America and various other nations were sailing. So that's why I have Spain still rocking the sail ships, just to represent that disparity in technology. For the most part, the American cruisers were state of the art. For the most part, I'm not going to say they were the best or the most advanced, but they were fairly on par with, quote-unquote state-of-the-art naval technology of the time, where the Spanish Navy very much was not. Their army was more or less on par with everybody else's. Once again, certainly not the best out there, but they're at least roughly on par. The transports are from the Axis and Allies 1914 version of Axis and Allies. The cruisers you can get from historicalboardgaming.com. And Let's see. The objectives and goals will be, America obviously has to capture Cuba and the Philippines. The Spanish has to do everything they can to prevent that. And I believe that's it. Is that a fairly simple scenario, very quick, only 2 turns. Yeah, so we'll come back with the first turn from the first half of 1898 of the Spanish-American War. See you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the first half of the spring 1898 turn of the Spanish-American War. And the Americans attacked Cuba and destroyed the 2 Spanish frigates at the cost of one of their cruisers. And then landed 2 infantry, a cavalry, and a cannon. And they only managed to get 1 hit, and Spain took it on the cavalry, and for the loss of 1 of their infantry. And then America took the Philippines, but it was costly. Spain had 2 militia, 2 frigates, and a coastal gun there, and America took all that down at the cost of 2 cruisers, an infantry, and a cavalry. So America secured the Philippines, but at pretty steep cost, considering what it went up against. So then America bought 2 more transports and all that you see there. 3 infantry, 2 cavalry, and 2 cannon, and it had $2 left to spare, so it bought a militia for shits and giggles. America, and then it sent transports back, so America's gearing up for a very big second wave to hopefully finish it off and take Cuba, or unfortunately, depending on which side of the fence you're on. Spain, because it doesn't have to worry about Philippines anymore. Spain just spent all of its money. It only has 5 because homeland is only worth 2, and Cuba's worth 1. The Philippines are worth 3, or 2. Sorry. So Spain had $5 to work with, bought 2 militia and put it in Cuba because that's the only territory it has to worry about, and that was the turn. Really not a lot of strategy involved. For America, just attack everything in sight. Spain, just defend everything in sight. Probably the most complicated thing was logistics for America. To spend all of its money but buy it in a certain way and place it in certain factories that it can get everything on the board that it bought and within range of a transport to pick up and send to Cuba. So it's that was probably the most complicated thing, is just the logistics of it. And if anybody's been wondering or noticed, we are using house rules when it comes to transports. What they can pick up and unload in one turn, and how the ground units that it's picking up or dropping off can do, and what they can move in one turn. So if anybody's overly curious about that, just send a question in the comments and we'll explain it. If nobody cares, then that's less work I gotta do. So we'll come back with the fall of 1898 and the conclusion to this very brief but fairly impactful war on global history. See you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the fall of the 1898 turn of the Spanish-American War and the conclusion. So, America did it, barely. But most missed, but just barely managed to get enough to take the last Spanish forces down. So, ending points is America 2, Spain 0. So, America has won the scenario, and so what that does carrying forward is Cuba will get its independence, and America will acquire the Philippines and Guam. Finally have its coaling stations in the Pacific. Oh, and this happened before the scenario, but I just remembered America also has Alaska too. 1867 America purchased Alaska from Russia, so that is in between scenarios, but just if anyone's counting territories and wonders why it's America's one off, America started with 41. So that extra dollar comes from the Alaska purchase. Yeah, that's it. A really quick scenario. Like I said, future consequences. America will have the Philippines and Guam. So come World War II, assuming there is World War II. That's still debatable, gameplay scenario-wise. But America having the Philippines instead of Spain will, well, that'll just play out how World War II would regularly play out, Axis and Allies-wise. But if America had not been able to take the Philippines and World War II starts with the Philippines still controlled by Spain, that would mean different things for Japan, but that's a couple scenarios down the road, and America won. So in terms of this playthrough series, you won't see it. Like I said, we'll do videos, or at least explain the alternate scenarios that didn't happen. That's about it. So a short scenario. Let us know what you thought. We'll reset the board and come back with the second Boer War, and where England and the Boers go at it yet again. So see you then.
Hey, thanks for watching Axis and Allies players. Don't forget to hit a squat on that like button. If you'd like to see more videos just like this, go ahead and click on our subscribe button. You can view all of our other videos on our playlists right here on Viper and NATO, straight from the nest, coming at you from historical board games, Z-Man Games, Parker Brothers, Hasbro, and Wizards of the Coast. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next round.